Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. Meghan Angley here for a first intermission report. The Avs are wrapping up the final leg of their 3-game road trip against the New York Islanders. It's scoreless after one period, but there's still a couple things to talk about generally from this road trip and a little bit about the period that we just watched. It started a little bit hairy in terms of the shots battle. A lot of shots on net from the New York Islanders, but Colorado comes away with it past the midway point in the first, 14-11, outshooting the New York Islanders. They get a power play opportunity in the period. I think they do a lot of the right things and gain some good momentum from it. Lineup looks about the same as what we saw against the New York Rangers, but they did swap out Calvin DeHaan. He is now in the lineup in place of Keaton Middleton on that bottom pair. Avs come in on the heels of an exciting win over the New York Rangers. They snapped their 10-game point streak with a 5-4 win on Sunday. It was a buzzer beater from Cale Makar coming out of the box. A lot of good vibes around this team then coming into the game tonight, even in the absence of Mikko Rantanen. I think that's one that's going to continue to be felt for this team, but my biggest takeaway coming out of that first period, though scoreless, is that top line leading the charge. Nathan MacKinnon in particular looks like a man possessed, but I'm still continuing to see the stylistic fit of Necas now in his third game up with the Avs. I think it started with the shots battle being led by New York, but Colorado had high danger chances that were pretty comparable with what New York was doing. And so I think that allowed them to move ahead in the shots battle. Lots of shots from the circles that led to rebound attempts and opportunities in front of New York's net. A couple of things I'm sure they'd like to clean up in their own end because there were a couple high danger chances their way, but some pretty athletic saves to keep them in this one and keep it scoreless coming into the first period. Let me just see what the chat is saying here so far. Not losing, not winning. Did Middlestat have some good hardworking shifts? Points in back-to-back games for the Persson Middlestat line, I think, is worth talking about in this game. I felt overall it was pretty sheltered for lines 3 through 4. In that first period, we saw mostly the top line getting the matchups, but that second line also getting some minutes, and I do like what I've seen of Middlestat as of late. I think the puck touches generally weren't coming for anyone until a little bit later in the period when the momentum seemed to swing their way a little bit more. And so I'm excited to see, because it's a necessary development in the makeover that's happened to the Avs top 6 following the trade. You really want to see that second line get going, even bracing for the return of Ivan Nichushkin. Getting Casey Middlestat to ascend back to the rightful place of second-line centerman is so important. Going back to a couple of some of those athletic saves in the first period, Bo Horvat with a wraparound attempt early, stopped by a big pad save to seal up that post to keep them in it. I think looking back at how these teams matched up back in October, it's a tale of two teams. The Avs that played the Islanders back in October had a different goaltending tandem in net. That was Cal Ritchie's first NHL goal. You might remember a big reverse hit from Nathan MacKinnon on Romanov. And I think the heavy hitting has carried over into this game on both sides of things. It's clear to me in the pregame scout for New York against Colorado that they need to control Colorado Stars by playing a strong physical game. So Colorado is going to have to meet them where they're at in that sense. I think getting the saves that they needed in the first period continues to be huge. I like the energy from MacKinnon with some of those net front chances. You can see trying to create across the slot in close, just some good lane management from New York to stop some of those chances. But Colorado's managed to break through by the end of the period, getting some of those attempts on net. I think the thing that I'd like to see more of is contributions throughout the lineup. You know, that was a period that was led by its stars and that top line, Nathan MacKinnon in particular. I liked coming out of the power play. The momentum that they built allowed for a backhand chance from Kelly. I liked that it was Logan O'Connor who drew the penalty to get them the man advantage when they did. And I'm not pointing to the weakness of the power play in the past as being Mikko Rantanen's fault by any stretch. But it is such a difference in the power play now that Necas has been added to that top unit. One of the biggest differences I'm seeing is the movement. Necas and MacKinnon are reading one another and rotating, whether it be MacKinnon firing the shot from the circle or moving in to be a little bit more of a net front threat. He stays out the whole time. And so I think Jared Bednar recognized that MacKinnon is on right now, especially in that first period. So I do still expect this to be a big game from the top line, especially how they started there. You know, he wins the draw on the face-off to get the power play started. They just don't retain possession coming back. And in resetting, a huge hit on Romanov to Makar, which made attempting to gain entry a little bit tricky, but they persevered. Martin Necas with a great spin move in the neutral zone to eventually gain entry on that power play. So on the whole, even though they don't capitalize on it, I'm still so excited with what I'm seeing. Let me know what you guys are thinking in the chat too. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts on how that opening 20 went for Colorado. Let's see. Vaguely Sober says, hopefully we see the forwards all stay under 20 minutes again. It's such a great point. You know, the game against New York really demonstrated what having lines 1 through 4 be a little bit more complete can do for the distribution of minutes in the lineup, especially in their attack. And that's where I think the success of a Parssinen playing on the second line, though temporary, has worked so well with a Lehkonen and a Mittelstadt, I think because they're able to distribute the minutes a little more evenly throughout the lineup. I think you get better out of your top players too when the distribution is a little bit more balanced. And for a player like Necas, who's getting top line responsibility, that is still, you know, going into a new system, a lot of adjustment. And so I think that's a player that Bednar is going to be watching closely to see if it's as much as he can handle and wanting to be cautious about that. And so if he can distribute some of those minutes and tough matchups anywhere that he can, a trusted second line that has a hardworking Lehkonen. I've loved the hard work of Parssinen too, and Mittelstadt seems to be figuring it out and showing just a little bit less hesitancy in his game. Cujo says this new power play is just 10 times better and already created more chances these last 3 games than all last month. Kind of goes back to, I'm not saying this was Mikko Rantanen's fault, but they definitely needed a jolt of something entirely different because it's not just Necas who's moving. It's the entirety of the power play. They're attempting to cycle the puck and they're moving themselves in addition to cycling the puck. And I think it's leading to better and more dangerous chances. Vaguely Sober talks about the push Ross into the bottom 6 to give Drury some higher talent to play with. I think it is interesting because I don't view Ross Colton playing in a third line role as any sort of demotion after what we've seen in him excelling in the top 6, especially earlier this year. He goes out of the lineup with an injury, comes back pretty hot. The way that I see it is he is being tasked with the responsibility of elevating his line, which is actually a high honor to be that player who has the skill that is recognized as keeping up with top 6 players in hopes that it can then elevate the skill of everybody around him in a third line capacity. I think that we're still seeing that line settle into what it could be in the same way that the Roaring 20s, you know, wasn't immediately the Roaring 20s. And even the Kivy, Ranta, Wood, Colton line of the playoffs, it wasn't until the playoffs that we really saw what they were capable of. I'm not saying it'll take that amount of time for Drury, Wood, and Colton to figure things out, but Colton is playing with Wood, who's missed almost 2 months of hockey, so that's going to take them a little bit of time also to get up to game speed. Bama Metcalf earlier says, I think Val will be on the top line when he returns, which resolves that left shot issue. I do think the right shot of Necas has added something nice and different to the top line and to the top unit, I think, is why I'm also seeing some of the variety, some of the difference. But I do like the talent distribution in thinking of Val as the top line player and seeing what a Necas can provide a second line. That just makes the bottom of the lineup that much better when Parssinen, who I think has been playing well and keeping up with the talent around him on the second line, he just makes whatever line 3 or 4 that he ends up on that much better. And I think having a player like Colton somewhere in the bottom 6 mix is where you feel a little bit of confidence about how this depth is going to round out once they start returning to a little bit of health, even with just the addition of Val Nichushkin back to this lineup. I hope too, in seeing how strong they come out in this first period with the top line in particular, you can get excited, maybe some optimism around what this more complete lineup looks like when Val Nichushkin does return. They pull out a really great win in the second leg of a back-to-back against New York, but it wasn't without mistakes, right? They let a 2-goal lead slip from their fingers and were playing back and forth hockey for the rest of that game. I want to see them take a little bit more control because New York Islanders, though they're struggling a little bit in their own division, they have been playing pretty well as of late. They come into tonight 7-3-0 on a 4-game winning streak, and they've got some decent players at the top of the lineup that I've already seen in front of the crease here against the Avs. So I think they're going to continue to play a heavy hitting game, and so the Avs are not going to get chances easily. But what I like is they're persevering. They're just putting shots on net, and the volume is there. Whether those attempts are being blocked by great lane management from New York, the effort is there, and I think that's a process that oftentimes rewards them. I anticipate then some kind of goal-scoring contribution from the top line, and this is where I want to see the depth chip in some way. Whether depth means for tonight the second line continues to get points in back-to-back-to-back games, we get a contribution from the back end. Cale Makar, huge game against the Rangers here recently, so they're definitely getting what they want in that regard. Or a third or fourth line goal, especially now that those are more complete lines than we've seen as of late. Bama Metcalf says, you create puck luck by shooting the puck. It's so true. I liked the quality of their chances, especially earlier in the game, but the momentum and the energy and the possession overall was just made better when they were shooting even more. I think that's going to be the name of the game for them. Continue to stay disciplined, too. I am excited by the optimism around the power play with where it's been lately. Some good goaltending from them in the first as well. So I think that there's still 40 minutes of hockey, plenty of hockey left to be played, but they're now 2 points back of Minnesota in the Central Division. I know it seems silly to say that those points matter because they'll matter every game the rest of the way, but they're 2 back of the Wild, who picked up 2 points on Sunday, 3 back of Dallas. So these points tonight matter, and it's a little bit of redemption after the 6-2 loss Eden Ball Arena back in October against these two teams. I'm looking for the Avs to level this series then tonight with a strong performance. I think it's so important for morale right now. Losing a huge piece of your core in a player like Mikko Rantanen is going to have a lasting effect, but you want it to be something that galvanizes you to continue to rally around the players who are still here. So I will be back for the second intermission report. Hopefully there's a little bit more to talk about. Some goals either way will make me very happy. Thank you guys for joining me for a solo intermission show. We'll have Jesse on for the post-game report, so stick around. There will be locker room interviews and Jared Bednar presser coming your way after this game because Jesse is on the road in New York tonight covering this as well, giving you coverage from every angle. I'm Meghan Angley, and I will be back to see you in the second intermission.